All right, well, we're going to get started here. It's just about the top of the hour, and we'll see. I think a few more people should be joining us here. But first of all, I wanted to say thank you for joining me for this seminar. I know it's difficult to find time in these new normal, and I applaud you for making time for yourself and attending a seminar and educate yourself. So I will do my part and do my best to be as informative and engaging as possible. As a housekeeping item, I suspect my remarks will last about 30 to 35 minutes. I will encourage you, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat screen, and I will address them at the end of the session. And then if for whatever reason you're not able to hang on for the entire session, just leave your contact information there as well, and we'll make sure we follow up with those questions as well as at the end. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm Stacy Krachan. I'm a certified financial planner with Insight Wealth. I'll talk a little bit more about my background in just a moment, but I just wanted to let you know how excited I am to be talking about this topic. Makes me sound like a nerd, but it's one of my favorite topics. And it is because it is something that's so important, and it is something that you can make little steps now that'll save us a lot of headache in the future. And yet it sounds like an ominous task for most people. When I talk about estate planning, it's not uncommon that someone will say to me, that just sounds like a headache. You know what? I'm too young. I don't need to worry about that stuff right now. My estate plan isn't very, or my estate itself isn't very large, so I don't need to worry about it. And then finally, the number one thing I hear is, well, my family's going to get everything, so why on earth do I need to have an estate plan? And yeah, I understand each of those comments, and yet I also know from experience that they can create hurdles in the future. So we're going to talk about just the risk of complacency and how oftentimes doing nothing can create challenges in the future. So my goal for today is not for you to come away as an expert in this topic. Honestly, we can spend hours and hours and hours on this and barely scratch the surface. But if I am successful, you will take action from this session. So my goal is to inspire action. So let's see, jump in, talk a little bit about myself. So I am a certified financial planner. This makes me legally a fiduciary. I've been in the business about 25 years. I started out as a CPA, and I knew early into it, it was not my passion, but I spent 6 years with a large firm, and it's been an incredible foundation for the work that I do. But many people who know me know that I often say that I am a recovering CPA and that I do not actively practice taxes, and yet I've got a wealth of knowledge from that experience. And I am passionate about financial planning. It is something that I just think that is so important. Financial fitness is something that's important in our lives, and I think that we can, the earlier you introduce it into your life, the better off you are. So let's jump into a little bit about the facts as it relates to estate planning. So 60% of Americans do not have estate plans. So if you don't have one yet, you're not alone. But again, my goal today is to help you get into that 40% bucket. Probate, which is the process that most people who do not have an estate plan must go through, is expensive. It generates $2 billion in revenue annually. So as you imagine, that is a lucrative business for attorneys. And you might argue some motivation there to not get you to do an estate plan, but $2 billion, woof. 400 million in assets go unclaimed each year in California. And that essentially means if you do not speak up for ownership of your assets, the state of California has the right to claim those assets after a certain amount of time. And yeah, it's astounding for most people to think that that could happen, and yet it happens quite often as it relates to estate processing. And then the fourth point I want to make sure I highlight here is that 30% of Americans often become disabled between the age of 35 and 65. And many people, again, will say, well, why is that relevant? And as we talk about estate planning, you're going to find that estate planning is really a process that protects you in your lifetime as well as in your afterlife. So I always find that telling a story helps me relate to things. So I want to share my story a little bit and also outline why I'm so passionate about this. So as I talked about up front, that most people have this three hesitations. I'm too young, I don't have a lot of money, and my assets are going to go to my family. So I often share my mother died at 53 unexpectedly. And I would argue that's incredibly young. You don't think about your mortality at that age. And yet she died unexpectedly. And me being 30 at the time, I didn't know anything about estate planning. I was still busy being an accountant. And of course, my family looked at me as being the person who's going to be responsible for it because I am an accountant. I didn't know anything what to expect. And so I was unprepared. My mother didn't have very much money in her checking account, and yet she owned real estate. And in the state of California, if you have assets over 166,000, you are required to go to probate. So again, something simple as an estate plan could have avoided that for us. And then the third piece of it is that, yeah, she wanted the assets to go to her children, and yet she had concerns that one of her children would not be prepared to inherit the wealth, that they would run through the money as soon as they got it. She was right. And she was concerned that everybody would look to me to handle it and it would be a burden on me. And she was right. It was an honor for me to help my mother with their estate, and yet it was burdensome. So when I think about the things that I learned through that process, the first thing that I would say is that avoid, if at all possible, making critical decisions before you are in a crisis. Have the hard conversations now. And most people say it's really uncomfortable to talk about what you want to happen if you become incapacitated or if you were to die. And yet it's better that you have those conversations now and that people know. Um, Understand what you need to know. So understand the processes. So the fact that I just shared with you, having assets over a value of 166,000 means that you will go through probate if you do not have an estate plan. Um, that in itself would tell you that perhaps maybe you should do that. And there's simple steps to avoid it. You know, honestly, when I talk with clients and they tell me that they own real estate in California, you already know right there that it puts you into that bucket. But there's some easy things you can do to avoid that. The third thing is just to know, or, sort of accept that death and disability are expensive. There was a moment before my mother passed that I was worried about. If she became disabled, how are we going to afford this? She wasn't going to be able to work, so I didn't know how we were going to cover it. And ultimately, I realized how expensive funerals can be. At 30, I just didn't have money put aside for that. So you want to make a plan for that and think about how you would like your final affairs to go. Um, Number four, friends and family, they're so well intended, and yet they bring in their own baggage. They'll bring in their own opinions and want to give you guidance and ideas of what they would do. And my advice is align yourself with a professional that can help you navigate all of that guidance and advice there. And then the final thing, or I'll say the fifth thing that I learned, is that there's an opportunity to leave a legacy. You can think about what mark you would like to leave on this world in your absence. So those are just some things that I learned that I thought about that would have been important to think about before my mother passed. So let's talk a little bit about our agenda here. So again, my goal is not to make you an expert here, but my goal is to help you understand the basics of estate planning. So we're going to talk about simply what is an estate plan, why is it essential for women. I often get the comment of, well, isn't it essential for everybody? It is, and yet I want to highlight why it's particularly important for women. We're going to talk about more of the basics just outside of the legal process, why plans fail, and then how to get started. So let's talk about what an estate plan is. So an estate plan simply is just a plan that's in place to protect your wealth in your lifetime as well as in your death. So oftentimes when we talk about estate planning, many people will say, well, if I die, this is what I want to happen. And I will challenge you to think about, well, what if you live? What if you become incapacitated? What if you're not able to work? What if you're not able to use your voice? What's your plan then? So estate planning is important in your lifetime as well as afterlife. Here's sort of an outline of, if you have a well-designed plan, here's how you could benefit. Is one, it allows you to direct when and how your assets are going to be distributed. And this is so important because oftentimes upon somebody's death, you realize there are immediate expenses. Mortgage still needs to be paid, utilities need to be paid, final expenses need to be paid. And oftentimes if you don't have a plan on how to have access to those funds, they can be locked up for quite some time, and you'll have to figure out how to finance them outside of that. The other side of it, you also might want to pace the timing of the assets. If you have young children or people that you are concerned about not being prepared to inherit the wealth at the time, an estate plan allows you to time that out effectively. It also allows you to be efficient in the way that you distribute the assets. If you have control sooner than later, you can do so efficiently. It also allows you to do it privately, as we'll talk a little bit in a little bit. Probate is a very public process. You have to publish it and let people know that what's happening. So if you're somebody that's more inclined to keep your affairs private, having an estate plan allows you to do that. It allows you to reduce expenses and taxes. So as we talked about, probate is expensive, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about just how expensive it is. And if you are someone who has a large estate, it'll allow you to reduce your estate to avoid estate taxes. And then finally, I think this one is probably the most important here, is that it also allows you to designate a guardian for your minor and or someone who has special needs. So it allows you to have a voice in saying who I in fact want somebody to take care of my children. Gone are the days where the state just assumes that it's the next of kin. It may or may not be so. For something so important, you want to make sure you have some say there. So let's talk about why it's important for women. You know, no mystery here, and yet it's important to recognize that there's two characteristics about women that's so important. Is one, we tend to live longer, so it's more likely that we are going to inherit wealth. And then the second point, I love that clip art there because it seems so true, is that oftentimes, whether we volunteer or not, women tend to be the chief operating officers in our lifetime. I was just talking with a colleague, and she was talking about wanting to get a puppy, and yet she said, I know it's going to be my puppy because everybody's going to look to mom taking care of it. And that's just how it falls on there. So, you know, not saying it happens often, but these are the things that are most likely that happen in our lives. So this is why I think it is most essential. And I think about my own experience, and having it thrusted on you without being prepared can be quite stressful. So my goal here is to help you be a little more prepared. So let's just talk about what are some of the elements of an estate plan. You know, there's lots of different processes and words here, but typically when we're talking about estate plan, we're talking about the legal documents, what is a will and or a trust, powers of attorney, and then insurance. So let's talk a little bit about the legal documents. So both of these documents provide a voice for you in your absence. With the will, it's a simple document that essentially outlines what are your wishes upon your passing. As I mentioned, if you have an estate that's over $166,000 in California, you must go through probate, even if you have a will in place. And that's usually the number one misunderstanding I find with people that I talk to. They'll say, well, I have a will, and you know, the will outline what you want to happen, and yet it must go through probate. So let's talk a little bit about probate. Probate is essentially a process that's required by the state. California, we have probate. Not all states do. So that's another thing that's important to make sure you're aware of. But in the state of California, probate is a process that means that you just have to prove your estate. So if you outline that says that I am a married person and my spouse gets all of my assets, the state will say you must prove that, and you must prove that there are no other heirs there. When I think about families that are blended or families with children, it's very common that they'll highlight what their current children are, and yet through the probate process, it is not uncommon that you will find out that other children that perhaps people were not aware of come out. So it is a very public process for that reason. You must post information in the newspaper, make sure people know aware that this person has passed, and that we are soliciting anybody who may have a right to this estate or think that they may have a right to the estate. It is timed out, so it can be a very lengthy process. At a minimum, probate takes 12 months, but it could go on for years just depending upon what you find there. You are able to designate an executor, and yet if you don't have somebody in place, the state will assign one for you. So again, it is something where it's a simple process. You can outline what your needs are, and yet upon your death, you have very little control of what happens because the state will set the process through probate. Now, the good news is that there are ways that you can circumvent this. In the state of California, if you have a simple estate, you could designate a beneficiary for your real estate. So that's an easy way of getting your assets out of your estate. You can designate a beneficiary upon your death and avoid probate. Some people like to have a little bit more control, or their estates are not as simple. So in that case, I would advocate for having a living trust. A living trust is essentially another legal document that creates an entity that is enacted during your lifetime as well as after your lifetime, that sets the rules and the guidelines on how you would like your estate to be directed in the event of your incapacitation or your death. So it is a legal entity. You create this legal document. You are the grantor, you are the creator of it, and then you designate trustees. You may be the trustee over it during your lifetime, and yet you would designate a successor trustee upon your death, somebody who would step in to assist you when you no longer have a voice. The cost for creating a trust often is a hurdle for many. It depends on the complexity, but somewhere in the ballpark of $1,500 or $2,000 is the start. But when we talk about the expense of probate, it's a small expense, and that's it. I didn't go into the expense. So probate, the state has set guidelines on how much your attorney can charge you. Just to give you an idea, on the first 100,000, they can charge up to 4%, and then it trickles down. But I did a quick calculation on an estate of $1 million. It comes out ballpark about 23,000. So you think about that, not having an estate plan out the box. Your house is valued $1 million. There's a potential cost for 23,000, and I'm not interested in paying that. So paying the cost of 2,000 for a living trust seems much more easier to navigate. Now let's talk about the powers of attorney. So the will and the trust essentially outline what your wishes are, but powers of attorney essentially allow you to delegate authority in your lifetime to have somebody assist you in your absence. So there's a couple different types of powers of attorneys. You can designate a general power of attorney. This is somebody who assists you in a variety of capacities. So let's say you're traveling and you need to have a real estate transaction completed. A general power of attorney can help you with that. You can designate a limited power of attorney, and they can help with just particular transactions. The key thing to know is that these power of attorneys do terminate upon your incapacitation. So the first two here are listed, general and limited. They're only allowable while you are of sound mind. So you may consider creating what's called a durable power of attorney. A durable power of attorney allows somebody to be your voice in your absence, even in incapacitation. So oftentimes we talk about the importance of having a financial power of attorney as well as a health power of attorney. So in the event that you're in an accident or you're for whatever reason not able to use your voice, a durable power of attorney is able to make sure that your bills continue to get paid, that they can complete any transactions or anything that you're doing. And you can also limit it to say that that durable power of attorney is a springing power of attorney. So it's only in the event of your incapacitation. But the point of this that I wanted to highlight is that, one, there's an importance to have somebody as your second, somebody who is there to support you in the event of your incapacitation, inability to speak, and that there's flexibility in doing that. As you might imagine, upon my mother's passing, I realized the importance of this, and I went ahead and designated my own durable power of attorneys. And at 30, my friends were laughing. What 30-year-old has a durable power of attorney? And I said, I do, based on my experiences. The thing to note also, though, is that power of attorneys do terminate upon your death. All powers of attorney terminate upon your death. And the reason why I say that twice is because it then, for me, further reinforces the importance of having an estate plan so that you have somebody in place to represent you upon your death. All right, so now let's talk about how to protect your wealth during your lifetime. In addition to having the estate plan, insurance in my mind is just imperative to have. So insurance essentially is just a contractual agreement that you have with an insurance company for a predictable outcome based on an event. So my house catches on fire, my homeowner's insurance should be there to make sure it protects me so that I'm able to rebuild. When I think about your wealth, I think about your wealth in three components. So income and disability, income, your health, and then your assets. So when it comes to your income, you want to make sure you're protected in the event that you are unable to work. Let's say you fall down and you hurt yourself, you're not able to make it to work. Disability insurance will replace that income during your lifetime. And if in the unfortunate situation is that you were to die and there's somebody still depending upon your income, your spouse, your family, life insurance is there to replace that income for them. Your health insurance, it's important to have medical insurance and that it helps you manage the cost of insurance. And we certainly know that more and more that it just becomes expensive. So having health insurance helps you to protect yourself so that you're not paying an inordinate amount of money out of pocket for that. And then also assisted care. Assisted care is in the event that you need long-term care. It's likely that you're not going to recover from the event that has happened and you need more intensive care. You can buy insurance in that area. It is something that is expensive. It's something that many people question whether they should get it or not, and yet working with a financial professional, they can help you make that decision. The third component here is protecting your assets, and we often think about homeowners and auto insurance. Those policies are pretty standard here in California. It's difficult to own a house if you don't have homeowners, and it's difficult to drive if you don't have insurance, or it's not, I shouldn't say difficult to drive, but it's not legal to drive without auto insurance. Both of those protect you in the event of an accident or theft, but many people don't think about, well, what else could happen? So let's say you're walking in the mall, in the shopping center, and you accidentally trip somebody and that person wants to sue you. It's likely you're not covered under those other two policies. So there's a third policy called an umbrella insurance. And I am an advocate of umbrella insurance, particularly if you're somebody that has real estate or has, reasonable wealth here. It protects you for everything else that is not covered for those other pieces of it. So if your insurance agent is not talking to you about umbrella insurance, it's certainly something worthwhile mentioning. It's inexpensive. That's the best part of it. And it protects you for everything else. So we've talked a lot about just the basics of estate planning. What are the legal documents? What are the powers in place you need to have? And what's the insurance that you should have in place? But I think it's also important that we talk about expressing your wishes in your own voice. So legal documents are going to be very clear of how it's supposed to be legally, but I often encourage my clients to write a love letter to their family. It's something in your own voice that you're able to let them know. What are your wishes? What are the things that you want to have happen? It allows you to give them important details about, things that are going on in your life at this time. Are there, transactions, things that you have in the works that maybe they don't know about? You can tell them about that. Allows you to give keys. I say keys to the treasure chest. Many of us have our codes to our security alarm, our keys hidden someplace in the house. And if suddenly you're not here, do they know where those things are? I had an experience recently with a friend of mine who had her son living with her for a while. Unbeknownst to her, the son had hid some money in the house. She had become out of contact with that son. She decided to have her house painted, only then to find out that the son had hidden $25,000 in an event. And as you can imagine, when she went back to ask the painter, they didn't find the money. And I should go to say, it goes without saying that that her son didn't find the money either. So I always say it's important the things that we keep private, it's important to let people know. So this letter allows you to highlight those things, but it also allows you to outline, what are your final wishes? What do you want to make sure that happens upon your death? And then, as I always like to say, gives you the opportunity to have the final word. How often do you get the last word? That letter allows you to do that. But I just think it's really important to make sure you outline the things that are important to you. And then finally, having an estate plan allows you to leave a legacy for your family or for yourself. It allows you to fund future events. So depending upon your passing, you may find that you have a desire to fund college for your children, fund college for unborn grandchildren. You may decide that you want to leave an inheritance that perhaps you're not certain how it would be funded from your estate. So maybe you want to buy additional life insurance and make sure that the beneficiaries are for the people you want to leave money for. You may find that you want to be generous and leave something for a friend, somebody that has been well intended and taking care of you during your lifetime. You may decide, gosh, I want to make sure that there's certain things that are in my household that I want to make sure this person gets. So I think upon my mother's passing, one of my aunts had asked me for a pair of earrings that I had no idea that she had purchased for my mom, that they were so special to her. So had my aunt not said anything, I would not have known the significance of those earrings. So, leaving it in your estate plan, making sure that you have these details really allows you to leave a legacy. It also allows you to, if you want to have a positive impact in your community, you might consider setting up a charitable gift account. This is an account where you can fund now and then create distributions in the future, even in your passing, to go to your favorite charitable organization. And then the final piece, when I say leaving a legacy, if your estate is so large that you are subject to estate taxes, your estate plan, you can designate people to receive part of your wealth as a charitable contribution, so it reduces it. So it allows you to avoid estate taxes here. So let's talk about why estate plans fail. We all hear things in the news about famous people. Most recently, I think about the entertainer Prince. He didn't have an estate plan, so $300 million were at play that are still in the courts and eventually will be allocated to people that he likely did not intend the assets to go to. But that's just an example of why you want to have a plan. But oftentimes the plans fail because your family or the people you designate, they're just not prepared. They just don't know what they're supposed to do. I use me as an example here. And oftentimes we think that our family is the people that should be our designated trustees for our estates, and they may or may not be. So there are other ways to consider, other things that you should consider in terms of who might be the best person or the best suited person to manage your estate plan. Oftentimes, we go through all the hefty legwork to get the plan created, and yet it's not uncommon that people forget to fund it. So again, another famous entertainer, Michael Jackson, had created an estate plan, and yet the assets were never funded in that plan. So if you want to put your house in your trust, you have to go down to the county and re-register your house in the name of the trust. A good estate attorney will help you do that. But it is an important step that is an easy one to miss. And then finally, trusts are often not updated. It is a lot of work to go ahead and put the trust in place. And it's not uncommon that I'll talk with somebody that says, boy, we haven't updated our trust in 20 years. Well, my guess is a lot has happened in their lifetime. Oftentimes you have new people that have come into existence, children have been born, people have become married, or what we see on the other side is that, somebody's gotten divorced. So suddenly they no longer want that person to be a part of their estate plan. And yet it is not uncommon to find that an ex-spouse is designated as a beneficiary or included in the plan, or in the instance of some people that their children are not included in their estate plan because they forgot to update it since their birth. So my advice is always update your estate plan at a minimum, every 5 to 7 years, but certainly when you have some sort of a life event, somebody is born, you know, somebody's got married, somebody is divorced, things like that. So yeah, it's a common thing, but it's hard to believe it when you see it, and yet it's very common that it happens. So now we've talked about all this. Next is, I hope you're asking yourself, oh boy, this could be me. These things could happen to me. So how do I get started? Well, step one, start to educate yourself. Attending a seminar like this is a great way to help yourself just get at the start of the learning curve. I would encourage you, take some time, think about what's important to you, talk to your loved ones, and then start thinking about building your team. Now, we are in a do-it-yourself society, and it is not uncommon that we will see commercials that advocate for leveraging software to do things on our own. I believe LegalZoom is a software that you can use to create your own trust document, to get all the forms to probate your estate. I don't think I said this. I actually probated my mother's estate. I do not recommend it. I just absolutely do not recommend it. It was a very difficult, challenging thing to do. I saved money, and yet, yeah, it's not a pleasant task. If you're not someone that likes to do your own taxes, you really won't like to do these other legal documents. But I think that there are too many things that are at risk to do things on your own. I'm a huge advocate of saving money, and yet I think it's important to work with a team to help you develop your estate plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my role in just a moment as a financial planner, but estate attorney is essentially the person that will create the documents and potentially be a successor trustee if you don't have somebody there. You will need to have a tax preparer, and that you will have to prepare a tax return in the year of your death as well as for your estate. And then the insurance broker to help evaluate to make sure you have the right level of insurance. For me as a financial planner, the thing I love most is working with my clients and helping them to develop their plans, do analysis, what if scenarios, helping them narrow their focus and what they'd like to achieve. I provide education and guidance. Structure and discipline is incredibly important. I am somebody who likes to think I'm structured and disciplined in all capacities of my life, and yet I appreciate when my fitness coach reminds me that I did not do the burpees that I promised that I was going to do. So structure and discipline, I think, is so key to help somebody get things done, and that's my job there. And then ultimately, I coordinate a lot of the key relationships. So in instances where someone might not have a relationship with an estate attorney, I have referrals that I can make, and or oftentimes people will say, gosh, I really don't know what they're asking. I don't know what they want me to do. I will talk directly for them on the behalf of my clients and help them make sure that their plan comes together. So in just a moment, I'm going to open this up with questions, but what I'd say is if I've done my job, I hope that I've piqued your interest, and I've hoped that you're inclined to talk a little bit more about your circumstances. So if you are, happy to have a complimentary consultation with you. My contact information is here, and I'm happy to spend some time with you and help you evaluate what are the possible risks in your estate plan and what are some things that you can do to get started. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions and see if I've got any questions here yet. I don't see anything in the chat box, so if you have a question, go ahead and type it in. And then maybe what I will do in the meantime, being the planner that I am, I thought I might not get questions right away. So I went ahead and created my own questions that I get most often. So I highlighted this a little bit, but people will often ask, well, how much does it cost to create a trust? Generally, for a simple trust, you would likely spend anywhere in the amount of $1,500 to $2,000. The cost will increase depending on the complexity. So you got multiple real estate properties, but it's also a matter of how much time you spend with the attorney. Oftentimes, attorneys will charge by the hour to answer your questions. So I'm always an advocate of spending time with a financial planner myself. providing you education and guidance so that when you're ready to approach the attorney, you already have an outline of what you want to do, and it just allows you to be more efficient. How long does it take to set up a trust? Again, it depends on the complexity of your trust and how ready you are to do the work. But a simple trust could easily be set up within a month's time frame. And it's just a matter of going down to the courthouse or the county and getting it registered. But the process itself is not so difficult. Honestly, the most difficult part is figuring out what it is that you, or what you'd like to happen. So that's why I always say up front, educate yourself and think about what it is that you want. Oftentimes I'm challenged, people say, do I need a trust? So, it's a common question of, when does it make sense that I have a will? And as I've said multiple times, if your estate is below the probate level of 166,000, then in that case, a will would suffice. In the state of California, you could do what's called a small estate affidavit and step around the probate process and avoid it altogether. Let's see. Next is, what if I don't have anybody to act as my executor? It is not uncommon that the later we get in life that our circles become a little smaller. The people who we think are going to be there to serve as an executor either just aren't able to, or they don't want to, or you don't feel confident then, So my advice is evaluate. It doesn't have to be a family member. It could be a friend, or you can talk with a fiduciary or an estate attorney, and they will do it for you. There's a cost associated with it, and yet it's better than not having one in place. And then another common question that I get is, what if I'm not certain who to designate as my heir? It's not uncommon. You'll hear somebody that just says, I don't have children, I don't have family, or don't want my family to inherit those assets. This isn't a case where you can designate charities within your community, organizations that you would like to have inherit your wealth. You can outline all of that in your estate plan and make sure that they get that information. So let's see. Those are the common questions that I get. I don't see any other questions that have come in here. Let me think. That's the one. Okay. Well, I'm going to go back, let's see, and share my contact information. I hope that you've gotten some good information out of this. I certainly welcome your feedback. You can email me here if there are other topics that you would like me to cover. Oh, here we go. Yes, we will be able to share the playback. It will be posted on our website. So yes, you will be able to hear it again. Yeah, my pleasure. So again, I welcome any feedback that you have, and if there are other topics that you would like to cover, you just certainly feel free to contact me. But most importantly, if I've piqued your interest, then I'd say come and schedule and spend some time with me. Let's see, I did get another question. Let me see logistically. I am not certain off the top of my head, but I do believe that Texas does have probate. So again, you'd want to make sure you understand the rules there, but you can certainly connect with me and I'll help you figure out how to find that answer. But I do believe that Texas is a state that has probate. Let's see. So the question I'm getting is, do you have any information about life insurance? How much is needed? If you own a home, would you like to leave it to your children, even in your untimely death? So this is just, again, a more general question, but in terms of life insurance, it's a bigger question in terms of what are you trying to do or achieve with that? If it's a matter of replacing income, then working with a financial planner, I would be able to help you evaluate what are your income needs for you and or your loved ones. And then otherwise, we would evaluate what is the goal that you're trying to cover. But the question here, is it needed? In many cases, it is, and yet in other cases, it isn't. So it really is something that's unique. So I advise you to schedule some time with me. I can help you evaluate that. And then let me read the other question. So the question is saying if you would like to leave your real estate to your children, do you need a will or a trust? And as I outlined here, both would allow you to leave it for your children, and yet a living trust allows you to do it more efficiently and pass it on directly. It allows them to go outside of probate. Unless the value of your home is under $166,000, you will be required to go through probate. All right, let's see if I got any more questions here. Thank you for those questions. I appreciate that. And okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up here and let you get back to your day. But I really just want to say thank you again for spending time with me. And I hope you decide to reach out and just let me know if you have any questions and schedule some time with me. So thank you so much. Have a good day.